Hi, I'm Daisy Rain Martin, author of Juxtaposed and Hope Givers, and I have a special guest. This is a bucket list item right here that was made possible by my amazing students at Sage. We have Dr. Gary Schmidt with us, and we're going to go ahead and ask Dr. Gary a few questions, even though he just got off of a plane, and we're going to make him work for his supper here. So welcome. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you to my kids that made this happen, the hedgehogs. So I think the first question where we want to start is something that I get asked every single year. When is someone going to make a movie out of one of your books?
Well,
and what do we have to do to make that happen if there's nothing in the works?
You know, you can't believe how irrelevant the author is to the movie business. It's just incredibly, you're just incredibly unimportant. So if a book gets picked up, what will happen is that it'll be picked up for usually 18 or 36 months. Mm-hmm. And in that time, someone has to write a screenplay and then has to get it connected with a producer. Mm-hmm. And if at the end of that time they've done that, then you then negotiate for the rights, then you go on.
Right.
Whatever. So there's 2 steps to that.
Right.
And so Lizzie has been through the first step. They even flew me out to LA
really?
To do this. And then nothing ever happened. And Wednesday War similarly.
Mm-hmm.
Has been through that. And just a couple weeks ago I got one for Orbiting Jupiter. That will also be optioned.
Right.
But options mean nothing.
Options mean nothing.
It just means that someone may or may not do the screenplay for that period of time.
Okay, so we have to talk a little louder, is what my brain is telling me right here, which is fine. The Giver has sold rights years and years and years ago,
right.
And just recently came out with. I mean, that's crazy. So we're holding out hope. We are, because we're huge fans at our middle school, and that's all my kids ever want to know. Lizzie Bright actually is probably my favorite Dr. Gary book.
Well, thank you. That's really nice. Yeah, but as the writer, you just have to figure if that happens, it happens.
If it happens, it happens.
It's cool, but there's nothing you can do to make it happen.
Right.
So you just have to let it go and move on to the next book.
Unless you're concurrently a screenwriter.
Unless you're also a screenwriter.
That's not what you do.
And you also have lots of connections to various Hollywood folks.
True.
And no, that's just not me.
Not you. Yes. Okay.
And if you think about it, how many really, really fine movies have come out of books for young readers? Mm-hmm. Not that many.
I know.
I mean, Wizard of Oz, and then you're
right.
But it's not so many. So maybe it wouldn't be such a good thing in the end.
Well, we're still gonna hold out hope.
Okay.
So what's up with you and PE teachers? Did you have a bad experience as a child, or?
You know, it's fun. Every PE teacher I had as a kiddo was mean. For whatever reason, they just were really just mean people. I mean, they just all were, and so you kind of had to get past that if you wanted to, you know, be on team or whatever, or take it seriously. They were also out of shape, so that you would have these teachers who were wildly out of shape, who would be trying to get you in shape, and the irony of running laps by someone who couldn't run a single lap was not lost on me.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think there was this kind of vengeance, I suppose, as a writer, where now you can say, oh, you were such a jerk.
I don't know why people mess with writers. Are we right?
I mean, you do have your shot after that.
Right, exactly. So your female characters that are children are very strong. Mm-hmm. And I love that. I want to know if you would ever consider writing a female protagonist.
Well, the Merrill Lee book is the one after this one, and that's due at Christmas time. So it follows the next year after Wednesday Wars, that follows Merrill Lee. And
really?
She leaves and goes to a private school up on Cape Ann. So we'll see. It's been very difficult because writing for a female character, you know, is out of obviously my experience, and so it's a whole different kind of world that you're working on.
But you did such an amazing job with Lizzie Bright. Her voice
she was fun to work with.
Is fantastic. So I know it's in you. I know you.
Okay.
I know you can do this. So.
There's actually, if you go online, you can just look for Malaga Island, that story. What they did before they destroyed the island community was that they went they sent photographers over. And the idea was to prove to the world that these people were medically idiots. That was the word they used. And so they went over and took all these photographs, and then those were made into postcards. You can still find those postcards online now. And there's one in which there's a young girl standing at the corner of a fence. Her grandmother is behind her, and she is looking out at the camera, and you obviously see she knows exactly what's going on. And so she is just so determined and filled with a kind of righteous anger, and that became the model for Elizabeth.
That's crazy.
Once you have that image,
right?
It's really easy.
It was
to see.
Kismet, I think.
I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. So, would you ever name a character Daisy and not a cow?
I don't know. I do collect names. Yesterday I was in, Tuesday I was in, oh my goodness, another school, and there were these two kids who came up. One was Bennett. Is that a great name?
That's my family name.
Is it really?
Yeah.
I think that's a great name for a first name.
For a first, yeah, it was my family's surname actually.
Really?
Yeah, that's crazy.
And the next book has a kid named Carter in it, and he's a kid based on a kid from North Carolina, just
Right.
made out on a line.
Right.
There's another kid who came, and it was a signing, and I asked his name, and he goes, Tommy. And I said, Tommy what? And he goes, Tommy Nations. Is that a great name?
That's a great
Tommy
name.
Nations.
Yeah.
And I said, what's the ethnicity for that? Like, what's your people? And he goes, I don't know.
Yeah.
Which is perfect. I mean, he's like everyone.
Sure.
Tommy Nations.
Yeah.
But I haven't figured out how to use that name yet.
Right. So, are you gonna throw Daisy Rain into the mix, or because I never got an answer. We
No,
kind of went
see,
this away.
I've been watching all these politicians lately who never answer questions
Well,
like that.
we'll let you off the hook. So, this is I worked hard to gather all of these Garyisms, these patterns. You have these motifs in your books, and I want to know where they came from. But I want to go ahead and name some of them, because this is something that only people who read all of your stuff they would know this. They would know this list. Okay, milking cows is a thing with you. Chopping wood, almost cussing is a thing. Gardening. You also, someone of the very something something. You know, the teacher of the very spiky heels. And the kids met you at the airport with, welcome Dr. Gary of the very compelling stories. That's, you know, that was a nod. Various Christian denominations, hymns, preachers, broken fathers, mean PE teachers, dogs, Brussels sprouts, which no human should ever have to eat,
Right.
East Coast beaches, baseball, really cold Coca-Colas.
Wow.
So, so I
That's
wondered,
funny to hear you say those together.
right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's more, but those are the ones that just came to mind. But so I wanted you to talk to us about these patterns, how you collect them, and then how do you disperse them, and then how can young writers find their own patterns? That's a bam, bam, bam
Jeez.
question.
Well, you write about the things that you love, right?
Right.
And you write about things that you care about. Sometimes things that are familiar to you, sometimes not. But things that you clearly are important to you for some reason. And maybe the some reason is that they give you a kind of memory, or maybe they stir some meaning for you or something like that. So the cows, I mean, I actually love to milk cows. It's one of these bizarre things. I just really, really like to milk cows. Not with machines, because that's not interesting.
Right.
But if you go up to Maine and you're on a farm, and it's a small dairy farm, say, and it's like 4 or 5 in the morning, it's wicked cold.
Right.
And to sort of snuggle next to a warm cow, and then to milk, I've always liked it. So I mean, that sort of thing, it speaks to me not just about that experience, but about warmth, about trust.
Right.
I mean, if you think about it, what's amazing there is that there's this cow who's sitting here, a different species.
Right.
And you are working with this to produce something. And that fascinates me. I mean, the way we communicate with animals, really fascinating. I mean, anyone who has a dog, not a cat, because cats are evil and awful, but a dog, I mean, you know that you can communicate with that across species.
Right.
That's incredible.
Right.
And that a dog can communicate with you across species.
Right.
I mean, what a miracle that is, and how often does it happen in the world? And that just fascinates me. So
Right.
that appears a lot.
So you just pick these up, they're dispersed in your writing.
You put them in when they support the book.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's something that's interesting that you really care about and it's going to support the book, then you use it. Otherwise, it's just
right. You can't be gratuitous.
Right. So
about it.
in orbiting Jupiter, I needed something to show. I needed Jack to have something, Joseph rather, to have something that trusted him, and that had an instinctive trust, because no one does.
Right.
And the very first living thing that trusts him is a cow.
Right.
And I know that's not a lot, but it's something.
No,
and
but
it
it's so
begins.
fluid. It's so fluid, and I
You
think
want
it
it.
is so natural.
Right.
And I knew you had a thing for cows, and that's why if there's ever a daisy, it better not be a cow. I'm going to put that out there. And
I actually do have 3 cows in one book, and their names are after the Bronte sisters. So Charlotte, Emily, and Anne.
Oh my goodness, of course. Have you ever written yourself into a corner and you didn't know how to get out?
No, I do get questions like that a lot. It's sort of like, what do you do when your characters want to go one way and you want to go the other way? And there are writers who will say things like, yeah, my characters just walk out and they do what they want to do, and then I don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
But Vladimir Nabokov writes a book that you guys should not read yet. He talks about he says, my characters are my galley slaves. They do what they want. They do what I want.
Do what I want. Yeah.
I make them do it. And I kind of lean more towards that. So I'm not going to let myself get drawn into a corner. Now there might be avenues that you go down that aren't interesting or aren't fertile. They don't give you much.
Right.
Fine. You just go back and you just throw it in the wood stove, and then you go from there.
Yeah, I think that's one of the main reasons that I want to switch from a nonfiction writer to a fiction writer is because you have carte blanche.
The world's yours.
You guys don't know what carte blanche is, but it's a credit card that used to be. I don't think there's such a thing anymore. But it's
do whatever you want.
yeah, you just buy, if you want to go buy a Ferrari and put it on your carte blanche, it was unlimited. So they don't know that reference.
And nonfiction isn't that way. You do have limits because you have
do have
to
limits.
adhere to history.
Yes. So, are there stories that you have abandoned that you felt like the writing just was going nowhere?
Oh yeah, the stories that you think it's a great idea, and then you think, wow, this is really stupid. That was one time I was going to retell the story of the Wizard of Oz from the point of view of Toto, the dog, which at first sounded kind of cool, and then was like, no, that's really, really a dumb idea.
Yeah.
It's really just
Did you
bad.
start it though?
I did, and
Yeah.
then you just go, no, bad.
Yeah.
And then there was, I was asked to write a biography, nonfiction, this is your world, of Fanny Crosby, who's this great hymn writer from the early 19th century, or late 19th century, early 20th. And she wrote 25,000 hymns.
That's crazy.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
But all the stories about her, I just didn't believe. And because they all came up after she was sort of famous in evangelical circles. So there's a story of her, she goes blind at age 8 or 9. And so she goes up the Hudson River with her mother to a dock, and this doctor says to her, little girl, that's how it was written, little girl, would you like to see again? Well, what is she supposed to say? No.
Let me think
no,
about
never
it.
mind. Yeah. And so she goes, well, of course.
Right.
And then the doctor says, well, I'm sorry, because that will never happen. Now, first off, I don't believe that. I mean, what doctor would say that? But then her response, according to this story, is, that's even better, because then the very first face I'll see will be the face of my blessed Lord and Savior.
Right.
No kid's going to say that.
No.
And so the stories are all like that, and eventually it was so thick with it, I just said, forget it, I'm not going to do this one.
Right. Because, well, that would be fiction.
Well, it seems like, well, it's written as truth, but it's clearly wrong.
Right.
So yeah, there's lots of projects where you start them up, and you feel like, okay, is this going to go somewhere? And you think it is, and then it doesn't, and then you say, fine, it's a dead horse, and a dead horse is a dead horse.
Right. So, describe your writing process. What has to align for you to make the magic happen?
It's actually kind of boring.
Okay, well, lay it on us.
There's a small outbuilding away from the house, maybe 10 by 12. It's a wood stove, there's a desk, there's a chair, there's lots of books. And then I go over there, I start the wood stove. I've got 2 border collies, so we go over, start the wood stove, we go for our run for an hour, and I think about what's going to happen that day. And then we come back, by then it's nice and warm. It's been an hour to warm up. The dogs go to sleep over by the wood stove, and I sit down at the desk, and I use a typewriter. I don't use a computer.
I know, it's crazy.
It's hard to find typewriter ribbons. And so I do that, and then I write 500 words on 3 different projects, unless one project is smaller, or about 500 words together. And so that's not very much. It's a page and a half, really, on any given project.
Right.
And then at the end of those 3 projects, then that's the writing day. That's done. And that might take till noontime, and it might take till 5 o'clock. It just depends on the day. Sometimes there are other projects that will intervene, so if there's a deadline, that might take over the day. Or if there's one project that has to get to a certain point, that might take over the day. If there are revisions that are due to an editor, that will definitely take over the day because you can't miss deadlines. So there's stuff like that, but in general, that's the way it goes.
Right. So my one little pumpkin said that she read somewhere that the papers that come out of the typewriter are burned. Is that true?
When they're revised, everything gets burned. Right. So if there's, let's say there's, I don't know, 250 pages of a manuscript, and now I'm on my 5th time going through it, say, what will happen is that when that manuscript is done, and I've now typed it again, this one goes over to the wood stove and gets burned. And it's part of the process. It's just sort of, I know it's done.
I'd really kind of maybe like a page
no,
or 2.
There's
just
the Curlin
for
collection.
posterity.
There's a Curlin collection down in Minnesota, which collects manuscripts. And now people don't use manuscripts so much because it's all word processing. And I was at a dinner and someone mentioned that, and the director there, I mean, she yelled at me. She was really angry.
Yeah, we're gonna revisit this off camera.
But it's just part of it. You just sort of, okay, this page is done, and then you can move on.
Okay, we're gonna be in negotiations about
Okay.
that. Okay. What is the enemy of your writing?
Speed.
Speed.
Yeah, and that's why I really resist deadlines. I don't sign contracts before the book is done, before the first draft is done. I don't want pressure on it. No, speed is never ever a useful thing for a writer. Deadlines are never ever useful, really.
I agree.
Now, there's some people who use deadlines as motivation. That's fine, but if you're pressed, that's really a bad situation to be in. And I think once you guys leave college, for example, you will never again have a moment when you have to take a deadline.
Right.
I mean, when you're writing now, you do have to have a deadline because the teacher's waiting for it.
Well, and even my deadlines are flexible. I would rather have a better product a day or a week later than something that I know is not good. They know it's not good, but it's on the due date.
Right, and so, yeah,
Right.
I just don't. I was with a writer once, and he was, we were driving, and I asked him when the next book was coming out, or something like that, and he said, well, he had a deadline, and he passed it, and I said, well, how long ago was the deadline? And he said, 2 years.
Oh, goodness.
And I said, well, is the book almost done? And he goes, Carrie, I haven't even started it yet. And his deadline was all pat. I mean, I hate that. I hate that feeling of owing someone a book.
Right.
So I just don't do it.
Yeah, right. So what is the friend of your writing? If speed is the enemy, what is your friend?
Wow, that's a really good question. That's a really hard question. I suppose everyone does it differently, but I think long walks are really good. At least for me. So that when I go in and I'm sitting down at my typewriter, I do not want to have no idea what's coming. Or to sit there and just, oh my goodness, I have no idea what I'm going to say. But I go on a lot of long walks with the dogs. And when I'm thinking in those walks about what's coming next or what the story will be, I think every good breakthrough I've had, every single one has been on a walk like that. So, I mean, last night, I've been struggling with this book for a year and a half, trying to figure out what is the problem here that I can't come to the ending, and why does this feel false to me?
Right.
And finally last night, I'm walking back, it's dark, the lights of the house in the distance, the dogs are happy, and finally I got it. I finally figured it out, and it's on a walk. I think that kind of thing, where you're not sitting at the desk, there's no pressure, there's nothing at stake,
right,
and you're just walking. For me, that's really been a good thing.
I think it's fascinating that you write 1,500 words. Is that every day?
No, I teach.
Okay.
So I can only do that in school days, or when school's in session. I only have 2 days, Wednesday and Friday. I stay home. Once you go into school, you're dead, right?
Oh,
you're
yeah.
not
No, I
getting
get
anything
it.
like that
Yeah,
done.
definitely.
But then I've got breaks, spring break,
Right.
and then I've got summers, and then it is every day. But normally in a school situation, I've only got 2 days.
And that's very similar to what I deal with as well. There's a guy in my writing group that wrote every single day of his 39th year. And that takes a tremendous discipline. And it's not like I can't do it. I can technically do it. I can crank out text. But I am such a slave to the zone. The god of creativity has to stand at my table and fold his wings. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
So when I write with you guys, don't I say, don't bother me? Right? If we're all writing, I don't care if your hair is on fire. Don't bother me. And may the god of creativity, like you've seen me say that, right? So that's interesting. So a couple things I wonder if you'll talk to us about.
Sure.
One is anchoring a story in a place, because you have all of your stories are on East Coast beaches, it seems like. So that is
Yeah. Well, I think setting is really an important part of what you're writing. I think a lot of people miss a lot of opportunities when you have setting only as a stage.
right.
And so it's just, here are your characters, they walk on stage, they do what they do, they walk away.
Right.
Which is fine, okay?
Right.
But if you can make this setting respond to the things that are going on,
Right.
or the things that are going on respond to what's going on in the setting, I think that's it makes it a rich textured book.
Yes.
So that, well, I mean, just imagine someone's fired, and she comes out of a building, and she's been in this really high-level situation, and she's walking out this big corporate office into the city block, and if she just goes home, well, okay, I guess that's okay.
Right.
But suppose she comes out, and it's really gloomy and rainy out,
Right.
and there's a terrible wind, and no one's on the streets, maybe one person with a black, I mean, that kind of stuff, that augments what she's feeling.
Absolutely.
But then flip it. So she comes out and there's a street fair. I mean, everyone's happy.
Right.
There's an accordion player. There's someone juggling. Everyone's got cotton candy. I mean, there's a little parade. I mean, that kind of stuff. Everyone's happy except for her. And there's the setting which is reversing her mode. Thus makes it so rich. It can make it so interesting.
I heard that 50 First Dates, the screenplay originally had the setting in Seattle.
Oh, really?
But then, they shopped it around, and it just wasn't getting picked up.
Yeah.
You know, no one wanted to make that movie. And then when they switched the setting and wrote it in Hawaii,
it was good. That's good. That's good.
There it is. So.
Well, and you write. I mean, in part, you want to inhabit a place. You're going to be working on this novel for 2 years,
right?
Maybe longer. And so, if you can create a space that you really enjoy being in imaginatively,
right?
So again, out of Orbiting Jupiter, I really just wanted to be in a small dairy farm in Maine, and to come out into your writing space and then to be there is really, really cool.
So how about developing a character?
Developing a character is slow. Usually begins with voice.
Yes.
For me, it begins with the voice. So that you start out by hearing that person speak. And then after that you add exterior, exterior, interior, interior. You go from outside in. Because the outside will suggest what's going on inside. And that kind of is just fun to watch happen.
Right. I'm thinking of Halling in The Perfect House,
Yeah.
and kind of the outside, how it looks to everyone on the outside, but on the inside,
Sure.
that's one of the most voiceless characters I think you've ever written is Mrs. Hood.
Right, exactly. 1960s.
Yeah.
This is a woman who is in a really hard marriage, and she has no options.
Yeah.
'Cause I can't tell you how many people have written and said, why doesn't she just separate from him? And the answer is she has no resources.
Right.
I mean, she will leave the house and do what?
Right.
Get maybe a job that may pay $600
Right.
for a month. I mean, it's just
Right.
not going to happen. And yeah, she has very little voice.
Yes.
She smokes when she can.
Yes, she does. How about creating conflict?
Conflict is hard. I mean, that's that is the thing that you're yearning for, right? That plot line that is going to give you something really interesting, and that you have to have it because your character has to grow. And
Right.
so it seems to me that plot and conflict have to be there so that your character can go from here to here. And when your character gets here, he or she is different than here. And we've all read
Right.
novels where that's not true. And
Right.
at the end you just go, well, so what? You have to have a character who changes and grows, who develops, or
Right.
at least who changes.
Right.
And it's conflict which is going to create that ability
Sure.
to do that.
We talk a lot about dynamic characters and static characters, and sometimes they think that the major characters are dynamic and minor characters are static, and that's not true. We have sometimes the static characters are the ones that change everything around them and create that conflict.
Sure.
So
There's a really interesting movie out, Super 8. You guys seen that movie?
yeah.
Isn't that a great movie? And I mean, here you have Joe. It starts, he's shy, he's afraid of the girl, he's not a leader in this group of guys, he's just always responding. At the end,
Right.
he's the one who's telling the two guys, you stay here, I'm going to go get Alice, you come with me. And he is deciding it, and he's leading, and
Yeah.
he comes up with a plan, and at the end, he's got the crucial line of the whole film. Because when the alien comes and grabs him, he's the one who comes up to the alien. He would have done it at the beginning, before we see him just crushed. He comes up to the alien picks him up, and he says the line of the movie, which is, bad things happen, but you can still live. And it's almost, virtually, the last line of the movie that's spoken.
Right.
And there's another 10 minutes to go.
Right.
But he had to get to that place.
Right.
He had to change and develop through the tension of what's going on.
So that brings us to resolution,
Yeah.
and I think you just spoke to that. Actually.
Yeah, I mean, what is your book about?
Mm-hmm.
And by the time you get to the end of your first draft, that's when you've discovered what your book is finally about.
Right.
But then you go back and you rewrite the book to make sure that it's clear that that's what the book is about.
Right.
Because you have to write it.
Tie up all those
Right.
loose ends. So here is a question that I want to know if you have a question about this. When writers write, they have something to say. We know what we want to say and we say it. Reading our work, that's a whole different function. We are so helpless in how our work sometimes is even interpreted so writers have one experience, readers have a different experience. And so I think I'm in a unique position because I bring about 100 kids a year through Wednesday Wars and OK for Now. And they have individual experiences and they have a collective, like we have a shared experience about those two books. And so I want to know, what do you wonder about where your work lands with your intended audience? Because I probably know the answer to that question.
You know, that's a kind of hard question because
Right.
I don't want to be the writer. I mean, the question I hated most as a kiddo, when someone would ask me to talk about a book, was, what's the theme of the book? I hated that question. I just could not get, I don't know.
Right.
I couldn't figure it out. And it always seemed so dang hard to figure out what that was. And the first time I read Huckleberry Finn, at the very front end, you've got Mark Twain, who says, as the writer, if you think there's a theme here, I'm going to shoot you. I mean, it's a great, and it's much longer than that, but the whole thing is, it's not about a theme.
It's not about a theme.
And I think for the writer, what you're going to say will come out willy-nilly, because you are who you are. But I think if you start with a theme, or with a message, or with, this is what I want to tell you, then it becomes not a very good book. And I think most young readers pick those out, bang, right away. It's the page where you're told what this is all about, that kind of stuff, or where I'm supposed to be a good person, or whatever it is.
Right, whatever the lesson.
Whatever the lesson is, and no one likes a lesson. No one likes a lesson. I got a letter the other day that started out, let me remind you that, and I didn't even read it. I threw the letter away. I mean, what an annoying, and that kind of feels
let me
like
remind
books,
you that, yeah, you don't need
feels
that
like
kind
books
of
are like that,
negativity.
right?
Right.
And I think the writer's first responsibility, fiction writers, will be different from nonfiction.
Right.
But for the fiction writer, my first responsibility is to get the reader to say, what happens next? That's what I have to do. I have to get the reader to get to the end of the page, turn the page, and want to go on.
I think that's a brilliant answer.
And you can't make it.
It somewhat unravels what I teach,
but
but
that's a different
I
experience
love
from
that.
the writer's point of view.
Right,
That's
exactly.
A readers are different.
Right,
But
exactly.
from my point of view, I cannot be, let me give you the sermon. I mean, the sermon, you write a sermon for that, you write an essay for that, you write an editorial for that.
Right.
And that's fine, those are the venues where you do that. But fiction is not about that. Fiction is, how is it that we get along together in a very broken world? That's what fiction is about.
Right.
That's why you can't write a novel about Eden. There's nothing to say. Right before the fall, there's nothing to say. I mean, Adam gets up, he gardens, he says, I mean, he reads
That's
a book.
so funny.
I mean, but he could write a poem, I suppose, but he can't write a novel because there's no conflict. Fiction is about our broken world and how we get along. But it's not about let me preach a sermon.
When we write our personal narratives at the beginning of the year, everyone wants to write about when they went to Disneyland, because it was really the greatest day of their lives. And I say, unless you're dangling off the Matterhorn by your ankle, I don't want to hear it. Because first of all, I'm just jealous that you got to go to Disneyland and I didn't, Have I said that? And yes, and Missy Miss just went to Orlando over there. I know, bless her heart. Okay, last question. This has been really brilliant. I'm so happy that we got to sit down and have this moment. If 12-year-old Gary could read one of your books, which one would you want him to read? Okay, but then what book would be his favorite? So there's really two questions here. So 12-year-old Gary, which one would Gary Sr. sitting here with me right now, what would you want him to read and why?
Wow, that's a wicked hard question. There's a book I wrote a long time ago called Mara Stories that I've always loved. And when I was 12, 13, 14, those were the Holocaust stories that were coming out. The Holocaust stories that we hear now are the witness stories, and it's important that we hear them. But the stories that I heard when I was growing up were the stories that were folktales that had been told in the barracks. And those stories were really incredibly evocative for me. And I don't even know how or why to explain that, but in terms of understanding how story can affect you, I mean, they were stunners. I just listened.
I know.
I remember, loved those stories.
Yeah.
I still love those stories. So right now I'm trying to write a book. It's a Ukrainian story that's going to be a frame story with 3 folktales. But the folktales, they're not really folktales, they'll be original. And those 4 stories. Those 4 stories, I'm trying to go back to being 12, 13, 14, and hearing those stories and how they make me feel of the Holocaust. I think that would probably be it, because if I had to think of a book that was important for me as a writer, that's probably it. Even though now I look at that book and I go, oh, I can do this so much better right now. but you know, you don't get
Books
that
are never
chance.
done, even after they're published. They're still never done.
You don't get a chance to
So
write.
what would be 12-year-old Gary's favorite?
Favorite?
Book.
Probably Orbiting Jupiter.
Wow.
I think probably Orbiting Jupiter. Yeah, that's a book of hope.
Yes, it is.
So I think probably that.
Yes.
And it's short. It's,
So 12-year-old Gary would
yeah,
read
I would
it.
like that.
That's
I wasn't a good reader, so it was. Yeah, I would probably be glad that it was short.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
We're gonna go eat.
Let's do that.
Let's go eat. So you kids hungry? You ready?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
I appreciate
That was
it.
good. You went to our